Hi everybody, I'm Jack the Rambling Raconteur. I hope you're doing well. I finished reading Mules and Men by Zora Neale Hurston this evening, and it's a great book. I highly recommend it. It's very entertaining, but it's also really, really interesting. It gives us this deep experience of a culture, and that to me was what I enjoyed just as much as the really entertaining and sometimes laugh out loud funny stories that were included within the book. And so it was published in 1935, and by this point, Hurston had had some success. Within her own lifetime, she did not have the enormous success that as a writer she deserved. That came, much later in the 20th century. But she had had some success as a short story writer, as a member of the Harlem Renaissance as it had emerged, and she had studied anthropology. So she had an opportunity in her 40s to go back down to her hometown in Florida, where she had been raised, not where she'd been born, but where she had moved at the age of 3 and been raised. And she then drops us with her into this culture. It's autobiographical, but it's this fascinating study of that town and sort of the surrounding community. We go out to dances, we go out to sort of a work site in the swamp, and throughout this narrative of Hurston's journey and her experiences, participating in the dances, having fun, just hanging out with all of these people, we are told all of these different folk tales and folk stories, and they're very entertaining, they're very interesting, and they're kind of broken up among the different places she went and who told these different stories to her. And of course she had grown up there and heard many of these stories, but now she's kind of returning with her heart in the place of this is my hometown, but her head in the place of I'm a writer and I've studied anthropology, and all these just this fusion of those two aspects of her identity as a writer, and it really works in the best ways possible. And it's also very fun. We get the scenes at the dances and the songs. There's an appendix within the volume that has a number of the songs and even the musical notes that you would play to play the song, which is great. So it's a lot of fun. We get the scenes of what's the food they're eating like. What are they drinking? And in one place, there's this horrible, vile-sounding rural moonshine that they drink. It just sounds terrible. So that's the first 2/3 of the book. And then the final third, Hurston journeys over to New Orleans and spends time, in some cases, weeks and weeks, with practitioners of Hoodoo. Or as she clarifies in the first paragraph, white people call it voodoo. And that seems very real, very immediate, and it segues well. But it definitely does provide a very different aspect of the culture of the autoethnography that she is pushing towards. But again, I highly recommend the book. I am going to read a couple of selections, two of the folk stories, and then one from part 2 where she's in New Orleans. But the stories have they're just all from all different aspects of the culture. There's stories, of course, about animals. And I think, some people are aware of sort of brer rabbit, but what they don't realize is that there are many of the animals can have brer put in front of it. This is in Florida, so there's a brer gator. There's brer dog. Brer gator and brer dog have a fight. But brer rabbit, of course, is one of the most common animals within those sort of fable type tales. And there's a key reason for that. If you think about a rabbit versus an alligator or a dog or a fox or all sorts of other animals, a rabbit is essentially defenseless. It doesn't have power. It doesn't have, and Hurston makes this clear in the glossary to Mules and Men. It doesn't have, large fangs. It doesn't have claws. It doesn't have a lot of strength. It can run fast. Any fan of Watership Down knows that. It can run fast, but fundamentally, the rabbit is a hero within the tales because the rabbit is clever. The rabbit is smarter than all of the other animals. And in the same way, you can see that within a number of the tales that, some of these deal with the horrors of slavery, they're set during slavery. Some of them are set sort of more in the Jim Crow era. But in all of them, there's no institutional power for any of the black characters, who are almost always named either John or Jack within the tale. Instead, the hero has to be smarter than everybody else. Has to be smarter than the slave owner. Has to be smarter than the devil. at times, and we'll see an example of that in a fun way. And so that's where sort of the rabbit becomes this hero. Because this is in Florida, we also have Brer Gopher, who is a tortoise. And if you read this, just be aware of that. So I wanted to jump in and read a couple of these stories real quick. So this first one deals with Brer Rabbit. So the girl wouldn't pay no mind to Brer Rabbit at all. She'd be listening to Brer Dog sing. Every time he'd stop, she'd holler out there to him, "Won't you favor us with another piece, Brer Dog? I sure do love singing, especially when they got a good voice and picks the banjo at the same time." Brer Rabbit saw he wasn't making no time with Miss Safroni, so he waylaid Brer Dog down into Piney Woods one day and says, "Brer Dog, you sure has got a mellow voice. You can sing. Wish I could sing like that. Then maybe Miss Safroni would pay me some mind." So this goes on. He goes, "Well, that's the very point." This is Brer Rabbit. "I know a way to make your voice sweeter." "How, Brer Rabbit, how?" "I know a way." "Hurry up and tell me, Brer Rabbit. Don't keep me waiting like this. Make haste. I got to see inside your throat first. Let me see that and I can tell you exactly what to do and you can sing better." Brer Dog stretched his mouth wide open and the rabbit peered way down inside. Brer Dog had his mouth latched back to the last notch and his eyes shut. So Brer Rabbit pulled out his razor and split Brer Dog's tongue and tore across the mountain with the dog right in behind him. Him, Brer Rabbit had done ruined Brer Dog's voice, but he ain't had time to stop at Miss Froni's nor nowhere else because that dog is so mad he won't give him time. So again, just there you go. That's why dogs chase rabbits. But another fun one. This one is one of those like so and so and the devil stories. Jack and the devil was sitting down under a tree one day arguing about who was the strongest. The devil got tired of talking and went and picked up a mule. Jack went and picked up the same mule. The devil ran to a great big old oak tree and picked it up by the roots. Jack grabbed hold of one just as big and pulled it up. The devil broke an anchor cable. Jack took it and broke it again. And so this goes on and goes on. And the devil goes, This is sure enough no trial. This is chillin' foolishness. Meet me out in that 100-acre clearing tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock and we'll see who can throw my hammer the furthest. The one who does that is the strongest." Jack says, "That suits me." So the next morning, the devil throws the hammer. Mind you, this is Tuesday. He goes, "Everybody stand back." He goes, "Y'all go home and come back Thursday morning at 9. It won't fall till then." Sure enough, the hammer fell on Thursday morning at 9 o'clock and knocked out a hole big as Polk County. They lifted the hammer out of the hole and leveled it, and it was Jack's time to throw. Jack took his time and walked around the hammer to handle, took hold of it and throwed his head back and looked up at the sky. "Look out, Rayfield! Move over, Gabriel! You better stand way back, Jesus! I'm fixing to throw!" He meant heaven. Devil ran up to him and says, "Hold on there a minute. Don't you throw my hammer up there. I left a whole lot of my tools up there when they put me out, and I ain't got them back yet. Don't you throw my hammer up there." So, again, Jack never throws the hammer. He's just going to spin it and dare them to call his bluff. And so, we have all sorts of really comical little 1.5 page vignettes interspersed with all of these fascinating scenes there. And there's also a palpable sense of danger. There's fights, there's knife fights. Hurston herself is attacked at one point. There's a danger of snakes. Anybody who's read Sweat will know what I'm talking about there. But then, of course, we drift over to New Orleans and we have there's a tonal shift. And Hurston is very much part of this. And so I was made ready, and at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I was stretched face downwards, my navel to the snakeskin cover, and began my 3-day search for the spirit, that he might accept me or reject me according to his will. 3 days my body must lie silent and fasting, while my spirit went wherever spirits must go that seek answers never given to men as men. I could have no food, but a pitcher of water was placed on a small table at the head of the couch, that my spirit might not waste time in search of water which should be spent in search of the power giver. The spirit must have water, and if none had been provided, it would wander in search of it, and evil spirits might attack it, as it wandered about dangerous places. If it should be seriously injured, it might never return to me. And then throughout the book, there are also really curious, sort of black and white illustrations, like pencil drawings that show Hurston or other characters across the narrative. So it's just, it's a really, really interesting book. As I said, the first 2/3 can be very entertaining, many of the tales. Some of them are quite violent. Brer rabbit attacking brer dog's tongue is one thing. But there are others that, there's violence, and there's violence, from slavery. But it really is an entertaining and interesting reading experience, one that I certainly enjoyed. As I'd mentioned, anybody who's read Sweat will get the snake reference. But it's interesting to see how, Sweat was published almost 10 years before Mules and Men, and yet it feels like so many of those stories, so much of that culture was present in Sweat, just as it is, in Mules and Men. Of course, Hurston is probably most famous for Their Eyes Were Watching God, which is an absolute masterpiece in my opinion. I reread it last year, so I'll link that video in. Within the idea of the Conjure Tales, one of the most powerful ones I've found is Poe Sandy by Charles W. Chestnut, which I read last fall, and so I'll link that video as well. And it's interesting because James Weldon Johnson, in the character he presents in Autobiography of an Ex-Colored Man, in a sense wants to do musically what Hurston did in terms of the literature of the southeastern United States, to go and find like rural black families and get their stories. It's one thing I didn't mention, but that is really fun, is throughout the whole first section that deals with all the folktales, they always refer to them as lies. They're always like, oh, I'm going to tell this lie. Oh, I got the best lie. Oh, I know this lie. And then what's really fast, and they all just accept this, that everything they're telling is a lie. But then they will argue about somebody telling the lie wrong. And it's fascinating. But James Weldon Johnson, I think, he creates a character who desires to do sort of something very analogous to what Hurston actually did in the 1930s. And then with all of the tales of animals, I was reminded, of course, by Jules Renard's Nature Stories, which is just a delight, a delightful way of looking at the creatures, and giving them some anthropomorphism that's quite fun. So I don't know if you've ever read Mules and Men. If you have other works by Hurston that you really enjoy, please let me know. And again, I hope everybody's doing well. Thanks.